of the opposition.
I call the honourable member Dennis O'Rourke.
Mr. Speaker, what is the most important part of this bill? It does a lot of good things and I supported most of them at the Select Committee, but the most important part is in fact the part which is not there at all. We in New Zealand First are now opposing this bill, not because of what it says, not because of what's in it, but because of what it leaves out. The bill omits the need to end the coattailing provision in the Electoral Act. It's high time that simply winning an electorate seat should not result in coattailing for whatever low percentage of the party vote currently enables a tiny and inconsequential party such as ACT or United Future to bring additional members into Parliament. This is a backdoor method of getting around the 5% threshold for list seat representation. Polling shows that the great majority of people find... Polling shows that the great majority of people find this to be unacceptable and they want it changed. There should only be one threshold for list seats, and that is the 5% or more of the list vote, irrespective of whether a party gets an electorate seat or not. We know, of course, why this is not being addressed, and that's because the National Party desperately needs the likes of the one-seat wonders such as ACT and United Future, each with an electorate seat, plus any additional seats they may be able to bring in through coattailing. It's the only way National will have any hope of keeping the Treasury benches in September. And the government knows that neither ACT nor United Future have any hope at all of achieving 5% of the list vote. So Mr Key and his party will ensure that the several additional seats National will need at the election in September will be achieved by National gifting an electorate seat to these tiny and otherwise irrelevant parties, and then hoping for as many coattailing seats as possible. This government is prepared to gerrymander the system and do whatever is necessary to get enough seats in this way. So National obviously has no genuine respect for democracy in New Zealand by failing to make the changes needed in this bill to bring an end to the hugely unpopular coattailing provisions. These provisions are making a mockery of the MMP system, which has otherwise worked well in New Zealand. The government's claims that there was no consensus for the changes needed are utterly vacuous because they know, and we all know, that no genuine attempt was made to achieve any consensus. And now John Key is further attempting to compromise the MMP system by claiming as an excuse for an early election that a period of up to 6 or 8 weeks is needed for negotiations to form a new MMP government, and he attempts to blame Winston Peters for this. But the truth is that the last time Winston Peters was involved in such negotiations, the actual period was less than 2 weeks, of which New Zealand First was involved for just 3 days. So the Prime Minister is simply not telling the truth about this, or alternatively, he just doesn't know, which seems a more likely explanation. Another thing that he and his government is not telling the truth about on electoral-related matters is the constitutional review. This was a deal done after the last election to get the Maori Party into a coalition. The review then actually happened over the last 2 years, but despite lip service being paid to consultation, very few people actually knew that it was happening. But the most interesting thing is that the review panel has made absolutely no substantive recommendations. All it seems to say is that the conversation should continue, a conversation with practically nobody, because the vast majority of the public didn't even know it was happening. Now, why is it that the report only says that the conversation should continue? It's clearly because the real decisions about the New Zealand Constitution will be left until after this year's election. And what will happen then will depend on National getting the minor party seats it needs, especially those, of course, of the Maori Party. Their prize will be to push through the constitutional changes then, which few people want, including the incorporation of the so-called principles of the Treaty of Waitangi, aimed at giving privileges to some that the rest of us will not have. So there is a secret agenda here, and it is the gerrymandering of the electoral provisions, not changed by the amendments in this bill, as they should be, which makes all that possible and indeed likely. So, Mr. Speaker, I see this bill as just the beginning of National's gerrymandering. They will do whatever it takes to keep the Treasury benches, and it takes the compromising of the electoral system to do it in the ways that I have described. For those reasons, this bill cannot be supported, not because of what's in it, nothing too much wrong with that, but especially because of what is not in it. The Select Committees and the officials' recommendations about the changes needed to the broadcasting rules, which I addressed in detail in previous speeches, are not addressed at all in the bill as it's finally emerged. But most importantly, the question of the coattailing provision allowing list seats to arise only from a party getting as little as one electorate seat is not addressed at all. It is bizarre that in an MMP system, the winning of an electorate seat should result in the coattailing of list seats. The two things are not connected. The concept in our electoral system is to either have electorate seats or list seats. These two things should not be connected. One should not give rise to the acquiring of the other. That is fundamentally wrong. It's got to be changed. The people of New Zealand want it changed. This government has seen that it will not change, only for its own narrow political interests. And if the people of this country see through it, they will see that this government does not get re-elected at the next election, and they should be particularly sure to make sure that seats like Oharu and Epsom are not used for the gerrymandering machinations of the National Party. That also is fundamentally wrong, and it's time the people of those electorates put it right. Mr. Speaker, the omissions in this bill totally compromise the integrity of the Electoral Act. It does not meet public expectations, and it does not meet the demands of the public interest. This bill should not pass.
I call the Honourable Kate Wilkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I rise
You're welcome.
I rise to take a short call in support of the electoral amendment.